So the LASPO Act was a reform in the UK back in 2011, 2013, where the government in England and Wales decided to cut funding for legal assistance, and especially for legal assistance for what we would call everyday legal problems, so housing, debt, benefits, and early legal assistance. So let's say, quite schematically, before the reform, at any point of stage of your legal journey, if you think that you might need a lawyer and you qualify, you can already go and talk to a lawyer. So if your landlord is threatening you with an eviction, that's enough, in theory, to go and talk to a lawyer. After the reform, we tried to keep legal aid only for last resort type of scheme, a bit more like a crisis intervention. So you have to have a formal eviction notice, you have to have a court hearing in place, so that everything which is going to be more preventive is going to be dealt with by another sector, and legal aid is really just for the very last stage. And the reason why I look at LASPO is I started with this question of how can we connect what's happening for access to justice with inequality, and we just don't have that much data on access to justice program. So the first stage was just to get some long-term data on how much funding governments spend on justice. So we have data for health and education on how much money a government is going to spend for these different sectors. We don't have the same for justice. So the first stage was just to create long-term time series. And if you do this, and I did it for a couple of countries across Europe, the UK just stands out because it was the most generous scheme which was implemented right after World War II. And it was also the biggest reduction in spending at the time of the financial crisis. So if you are looking for some policy change, it gives like a sense of what happens when you remove a scheme in a system which is already quite mature, compared to when it's just like, at the scale of a city, of a region, or like an experimentation. We have geographical variation, which will basically give you like some treated areas where you have a change in access to nearest legal aid providers, and some other areas where you don't have a physical change to nearest providers. So that's going to be like thematically like some sort of control and treated if you take a difference in difference type of framework. And I started looking at the housing story. So exactly for this reason where like eviction is not supposed to be affected, so what happens in practice? And what we find is that actually eviction increased in the areas where you lost access to physical lawyers, and they increased both in terms of filings, so meaning that more landlords take their tenants to court, but also in terms of orders. So when the judge take a decision, there were more orders not in favor of the tenants, leading to an effective eviction. And down the line, if we take the different type of proxy for homelessness also increases over the 10 years period that I'm looking at. So it seems that, like, in a way, the reform missed its target of, not touching to what was directly affecting your health and your housing. And one of the reasons for that seems to be that actually the reform went maybe one step too far by completely reshuffling the market of providers altogether. So it affected the timing at which you can access legal assistance, but also the scope for which you can access legal assistance, meaning that we know many people, when they are evicted, they face many other legal problems at the same time, but the lawyer would not be funded for helping them with every single one of their problems. So they might be able to help you with eviction, but they might not be able to make a compelling case to the judge that actually they have figured out the other things in your life that needs to be fixed. I think one of the broad insights from my research, which is actually something that practitioners are really aware of, but that we don't necessarily grab when we look at the aggregate effects, is the fact that the lawyer do not just deal with your legal case. So I think one way to think about it is that it seems that the lawyer acts almost like a navigator of the broader safety net. And to help win the case, they will have to either connect you with other services, refer you to healthcare, make sure that you're claiming all the benefits that you're eligible for. So obviously all of the different things takes time. And sometimes it's not necessarily the specialty of the lawyer itself to do this, but they might work in coordination with a social worker in the team, or they might just have community organization they can refer you to. But if they don't do this role of just acting like a gateway, it seems that it also prevents their ability to both stabilizing people's lives, but also preventing the problems to escalate to begin with. So it's possible that the role of the lawyer happen even before you actually have a court case in place. And this preventive dimension of the type of work that lawyers do, especially for low-income households, when it comes to civil cases, is really detrimental for the last resource scheme to survive. So I think another way to think about it is, if we want to design legal assistance scheme, we might want to have a two-tier system where on one side we will have prevention, right? And the prevention might be done in collaboration with non-lawyers. It might be justice workers who are trained for that work. It might be paralegals or social workers. But we also need them to have a direct link to the last resort and the courtroom defense, because if you weaken that link, it seems that the entire system is not, meeting its target or achieving the initial goal of protecting vulnerable population, right?